40's on the 80's has returned with a vengeance. This week we are joined by a very special guest, my brother, Robert Redman, graduate of the University of Missouri, Rolla. Say hi, Rob.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
And Daniel P. Sampson. What's the P stand for?
Philip.
I was thinking you were going to throw a line out from the movie Raw Deal with Joey P. Brenner.
I wish I had been prepared for that, so I would have said something funnier. I also could have thrown out Phoenix or something, equally dramatic.
Strong.
But yeah. Absolutely.
Mason Storm, Simon Phoenix, those are all great names.
Indeed. I wish I'd been prepared and come up with something better.
Society is breeding a new kind of criminal. It's also breeding a new kind of cop. Meet Cobra. He does the job nobody wants.
Did you use unnecessary deadly force?
I used everything I had.
Do you know you have an attitude problem?
Yeah, but it's just a little one. You think you would recognize me if you saw me again?
The tall one?
Yeah. The one that wants to kill you.
Do what you have to do to get a lead on this maniac.
And if I find him?
Do what you do best.
Stallone is Cobra, the strong arm of the law.
Cobra. The year was 1986. It was actually based off of a novel, which Stallone wrote the screenplay for. It's like he adapted the story from the novel. And I got to get hold of this novel to see how closely it mirrors what actually went down. But prior to that, Hollywood producers had written the script for Beverly Hills Cop, and they approached Stallone with the project. And he thought it was too comedic. He wanted something a bit more serious. So he turned down Beverly Hills Cop, and we know how that story turned out. But the idea of the Maverick Cop was heavy on his mind, and he saw the opportunity to create the character of Lieutenant Marion Cobretti.
Wasn't the book then later made into another film? I feel like I read that like 10 years later they made a version of the book. It was the one with Cindy Crawford in it, right?
What?
So
Cindy Crawford became the Renegade Cop?
I could be conflating things here. I thought it was Fair Game was the original story that this was based on.
Correct.
And then they made that into a film with one of the many Baldwin brothers and Cindy Crawford. and they made that film. But Cobra...
point for one of those guys.
Yeah. I'm sure we never heard of him ever again. But yeah, I feel like that's true.
This is something that I think that I had to kind of do a little bit of self-reflection on this myself in comparing Arnold Schwarzenegger's work to Sylvester Stallone's work. And, they both kind of have, how did you put it, Rob? Toxic masculinity kind of thing going on.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of what the 80s were all about, right? Toxic masculinity. So,
well, I mean, toxic would sort of denote that it was bad. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Sure.
It gave many of us something to strive towards. Nobody knew a superhero in real life, but you look on the big screen and there's Arnold in Speedos, painted up in camouflage. It was fantastic. But Stallone, not quite the stature of Arnold. So I think his fashion kind of reflected that a little bit. The choice of wearing heels and. They were more like heeled cowboy.
Sure, he's a short guy.
He's a short guy.
Yeah. And I also think it's fair to say that we mentioned this in the first episode again with Commando, with Arnold being in those little pants and scoring himself up with that camo paint and everything. And I think those were, those are confusing feelings that those images brought about. But
well, androgyny was kind of largely popular in the 80s as well. So it wasn't quite to that extent.
Which is exactly where I was going with this, because as masculine as Marion Cobretti is, his name is Marion,
Right.
but then also in the full length shots of him, he's got the heeled boots on and extremely tight stonewashed jeans. So there has got this there is this feminine edge to this incredibly masculine guy. It's really kind of an interesting look he's got going on, and also he's wearing these leather gloves basically the whole time. Interesting outfit choices.
It probably was around that same era when Miami Vice came out, and I think that they tried to, even though they were as polished in their clothing and cars, they started to allow the facial hair to come out. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Stallone was clean shaven in this movie, wasn't he?
It looks
That
like
is
he had
true.
some kind of stubble the whole time, though.
Did he?
I think so. Based off the poster, it looks like, unless they added that after the fact.
Rob, you're onto something here. That's true. Yeah,
Okay,
that's
so
true.
he does have stubble.
Yeah, he's not like clean
Well,
shaven
also
like
what
he
he
was in
needed-
Rocky.
He needed something to, sort of strike that match on that he was chewing through the whole film. So he's got the stubble going.
I think there was a little while in the
Should he
80s
need-
where I actually began chewing on one of those Strike Anywhere matches. Just, I thought it was a cool look, so I figured I think I'll try that out. You never know when you might need a match.
What age were you?
Well, in 86, I would have been 12.
So you were doing the match at 12, is what you're saying?
Well, whether you're chewing on a toothpick or you got a match in your mouth, it's not like I was smoking a cigarette.
Sure.
And like you said, it was the 80s, so toxic masculinity. But
It was a different time. You know what's interesting about this as well, though, boys? I was looking at this. I watched this again very, very recently. I was thinking about the chronology of the Stallone films right now. This is right in the middle of the 80s, right? So the peak of these kinds of action films. So they're finding all of these different formulas to try and make stories out of, and the kind of cop on the edge who doesn't play by the rules is such an archetype, right? We've seen it so many times.
yes.
But what is interesting to reflect on is this is 1986, and First Blood was only in 1982, which is a very, very serious film,
Right.
right? There's only a couple of years really in a couple of production years really that separates these two films, and how quickly he went from First Blood really had something to say, didn't it? It was a real movie. It was again based on a novel about returning veterans, and really had something to say. And within the span of a handful of years, we've got John Rambo to Marion Cobretti. It was interesting to see just the evolution of that type of action hero, and obviously how much money there could be made from making these kind of disposable popcorn action films.
This came on the Stallone-sized heels of the movie Commando, though, if I'm not mistaken.
Indeed, it did.
So you think
That's
Commando
what I'm
kind
saying.
of
Right? So
up things up?
Well, I mean, when we did our first podcast, there was a fair amount of research involved, and it's largely accepted that Commando is the granddaddy of all action films.
Yeah.
All right. Rob, your opinion.
Yeah.
You saw Cobra, and throughout the
I did.
movie, how were you feeling?
Yes.
Were you feeling conflicted about your own masculinity watching this? Feeling like you had missed out on something? Or
No, I felt very confused the whole time just because it didn't seem like the plot made any sense.
it's
Personally.
a pretty straightforward plot, though. I think it doesn't get much simpler.
Yeah, I understand that the female lead saw what was the Axe Gang lead, like the
Right.
main bad guy, and they went after her to prevent her from doing who knows what. And if anybody got in the way, including every single cop in the movie, they would blast them away to get to her, which just seems conflicting.
But I mean, it's meant to be more so enjoyable. The one-liners,
Sure.
the action. It was on full display, even as far as him having a vanity plate on his souped-up, awesome 50 car. For a cop on the edge working the zombie squad, for him to, just imagining him standing in line at the DMV to get his vanity plates.
Yeah.
Could almost be a film in itself, in my opinion. It's like, who's he interacting with at the DMV? Is he throwing one-liners at the lady behind the counter?
And they're going, listen, you've got to take off your mirrored aviators for your photo, for your license. And he's going, absolutely not.
He's arguing about the stats. He's like 5'10", and they're like, "No, you're in heels. 5'2", 5'10".
That's right.
So
Take the shoes
And
off.
of course, you'd
Take
be able to
the
see
shoes
his
off.
the photographer in his glasses, like you could see him in the entire movie.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of which,
Yeah.
Dan, this one really threw me for a loop. As many times as I had seen that movie, when I watched it with my brother, I guess maybe I had sort of taken some of my blockers off. It's like I was no longer, just secure watching this. I kind of wanted to try to expand my vision to be able to pick up on things that he might see. I never realized that this was a Christmas movie. Reactions.
Mate, you're so right. Yeah, I know. It's staggering, isn't it? Because there's like the really famous scene where he pushes the gangster's cars out of the way, goes into his apartment and eats the pizza with scissors, which I just want to point out as well. He gets the pizza out of the freezer.
Yes.
Go back and watch it, right? He doesn't get it out of the fridge. He gets it out of the freezer and then as we all know, which is wonderful, he cuts it out with a pair of scissors and then eats it with gloves on.
Right.
So all kinds of things are happening there. I don't know what all of that means, but anyway, it's particularly bonkers, even in the context of an 80s action film.
But I think it's just meant to be like character
TV,
building.
Yeah. Probably you're right.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's right. There's Christmas commercials on the TV that he's watching where he sees the reports about the night killers, right? Well, and then great car chase in Cobra. Probably that actually I think is the highlight of the film. There's a really good car chase.
Yes.
And when they tear into this multi-level parking lot, car park, there's a guy in a Santa suit in the attendant booth who kind of sticks his head out and goes, whoa, and jumps out of the way as the cars.
I totally missed that
through,
part.
yeah.
I mean, what clued me in was at the very beginning, the supermarket shootout. They have holiday things posted or painted on the windows of the store. And I think they even had Christmas music playing in there, if I'm not mistaken. I may be wrong.
Yeah.
Do you think this was supposed to be released in December and then it got pushed back? Because from what I'm reading, it was a May film, so it was released in '86. So could they have just been lazy and just this is when they were filming it, so there was a bunch of Christmas stuff going on?
I don't know. Like even with Die Hard, I don't think they were conscious of the idea that this could become a holiday classic, which would kind of keep it in circulation longer. You know what I mean?
But this is a very interesting point, though, Rob, right? We see the final cut, right, that's been released and you can watch it now and all that kind of stuff. Did the holiday in the original script feature more prominently? Because it's because of a weird sort of just throwaway detail in the film, isn't it? Whereas the Christmasness of Die Hard has become almost like that's a thing that people talk about all the time now, right? That it's a Christmas movie. And the other thing, the other one I'll throw into this as well is Lethal Weapon. Lethal Weapon also takes place over Christmas. Yeah, I always wonder if in the original script, the fact that it's at Christmas is more prominent. But with as films get edited and they cut a film down to the most efficiently told story, or at least you hope they do, and then it just becomes just a kind of a minor plot point detail.
I think it was a plot point in Cobra that was largely disposable because if you look at Die Hard, there are components of Christmas that play into the story. When he kills the one guy, puts him in the chair and sends him down with a message on his chest, now I have a machine gun, ho, ho, ho. And then towards the end of the film, the way that he deals with the final bad guys is he tapes a gun to his back, which I always had a problem with. But he's using like Christmas tape of some sort. And he tapes his gun to the middle of his back somehow after he's covered in dirt, grime, sweat, and blood. And somehow gets that gun to just sort of hang out up there. But anyways, the Christmas part of it really factors into Die Hard, I think. That's the reason for the party, right?
Yeah.
The whole, that's the entire point, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. So looking at, he's flying into California to spend Christmas with his kids. So yeah, it really does factor in. Cobra, no, it's sort of like something that they threw in there and they clung to. They're like, hey, we got to realize this is happening at Christmas time, so we need to remind the audience that it's still Christmas time. Maybe that toll booth guy, let's put him in a Santa suit. Now, something that just occurred to me, and I would love to reenact this sometime. We might even have to script it out. But the Axe Gang, all right, the New World Order, whatever it is they're trying. I don't know what their mission statement is. I would love to explore that. The rules, is it like Fight Club? You don't talk about Axe Gang. The second rule of Axe Gang is you don't talk about Axe Gang. Yeah. I need to go back and look at it. Did they have anybody in a Santa suit clinging their axes?
Good question.
That would have been amazing.
Well, they're also confusing because you're talking about don't talk about Axe Gang, and yet each member had a tattoo on their wrist, which is one of the most visible places to have it when you live in California. Yes,
that's true. Yeah,
I was on the inside of their wrists.
Yeah, because one of the people pulled up their sleeve to cover it up at one point.
This is not a very practical gang.
No. And also to try and kill the main Stallone's wife at the time,
Right.
Bridget Nielsen. And just like it didn't make sense that they were going after her when they were literally killing cops to get to her. You know, if they're trying to hide themselves, it doesn't make sense. But I'm just getting back to the plot, so I apologize.
Well, no, we need some of that because we tend to start jumping all over the place when we talk about these shows.
There's just so much to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, the Axe Gang is very inconsistent. Like with the one...
Hardly ever use axes.
Right. There is a part where they're swinging axes in the parking garage when they're trying to get Brigitte Nielsen, but this is after she's already witnessed them kill somebody. Yep. And if you remember that scene, it's like a waitress. She's going out to her car in the middle of the night. She gets into her car after she sees the van pull up and the back door's open. So obviously some bad stuff is about to happen. And they basically announce themselves by holding the axe up to the window. But the way they kill her is with that big spiked knife. So how does the knife factor in? And this is something as well, Dan, that I thought would have been interesting. The final fight, the big finale, where they track them down and they're all on motorcycles. Imagine if they were only using axes. Like they just showed up and they're throwing axes left and right, and they're chopping at things. And, axe against Stallone's gun.
And trying to steer at the same time. I mean, it's just like it's chaos. It's chaos.
And the throttle. They'd have to be switching hands probably, like changing gears, holding the brake. Oh, this axe is getting...
gear, yeah.
Maybe they would have to wear the axes on their back.
I think you're probably right. Or they'd have to have some kind of, sort of frame set up across the handlebars.
Yes.
They could get the American Chopper guys to figure this out for them, but they could have like a rack on the front there. You could lift a selection of small axes onto and have them ready to throw. All the while, but I mean, I think we'd all agree that they need to stay in a low gear so they stay steady while they're doing it.
Maybe their shortcoming is that they limit themselves as the Axe Gang. Maybe they should have been more like a lumberjack gang. You know, it's like where they can wear plaid. And lumberjacks, they have all sorts of axes, large ones. They have saws. Yeah, they have the spikes when they're doing those competitions where they go running up a tree and they start chopping it down.
That's true.
Imagine that in an action sequence.
Yeah.
Wow.
And also, you really are going to get some great members if you're getting the guys who can chop through one of them big logs really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like entry sort of criteria into the gang. Let's see how quickly you can chop through this log.
But then what are these lumberjacks doing in Los Angeles?
I was reading it was supposed to be originally filmed in Seattle, so maybe this is a holdover from the original script when they were thinking, because Seattle makes way more sense for lumberjacks or axes than it does for LA.
Correct. That's true. Good point.
All right. I don't know if this is just me thinking out loud here. Probably is. But we need to rewrite this movie. They are redoing everything. Let's rewrite this one. Put it in Seattle, and it's the Lumberjack Gang.
I like it. Yeah.
And think about the hills. Put the Awesome 50 on those hills in Seattle.
Oh, man.
It would be like Evil Knievel.
It really would be, yeah. The other thing as well, which was I always found was a really interesting detail of this film that just could never really understand why it was there. There's just like a full-on music video right in the middle of the film.
There's a couple.
And is there really?
Yeah.
Is there more than one?
I am pretty sure there is.
When they're all shown in their sort of bunker and there's music playing and stuff. But I just feel like when it's Bridget Nielsen, who, interestingly enough, I believe her name in this movie is Ingrid Knudsen, which is just hilarious. And she's doing a modelling shoot, right? And they're just she's posing, with a sexy robot. And it's just it's this full on music video, and it goes on for a long time.
Yeah.
And I don't think this was a thing that Stallone was really into, because there's a version of this in Rocky IV as well. Where he goes out for a drive with no way out, right? And he's driving around and he's thinking of Drago and thinking of Apollo and all that kind of stuff. But that is, again, it goes on for the length of an entire pop song.
Yeah. And
just right in the middle of the film.
I wanted to bring that, as soon as you mentioned that, it reminded me when I watched it with my brother, that music video portion of the movie had just begun. Right when my son walked up saying that, because my son is diabetic, and he was like, hey, my numbers are low. So I had to walk away. Rob continued to watch the film. I had to do a blood glucose test. I had to provide a snack. I had to wait a little while and then retest them. I came back to the recording, and that music video was just ending. It's like I was able to accomplish so much in the span of that one piece of film that was just a music video. like you said, they played the entirety of that song.
Do you think it's because of like MTV came about in the early '80s that it was maybe at its peak level at '86, so they were like really.
I mean, Miami Vice had a lot of that. Miami Vice had a lot of that, but I really, Dan, correct me here. I can't think of a whole lot of other movies that had those same kind of montages. Karate Kid did.
That's a great observation, Rob, and I think you're right. It was probably tapping into like a cultural moment, where like music videos were like the hottest thing in the world that you could do at that time, like mid '80s. Just like that, MTV is suddenly becoming popular. That's such a great observation. I think you might be right. I think they were connecting these films to a broader cultural moment. Mm-hmm. I think that's it. Yeah.
I could also tie that music video in to just looking at the big picture of this whole movie. I think that they filmed that first. I think that Stallone was like, I love my girlfriend, Brigitte Nielsen. She's so sexy. Let's do some sexy robot stuff. Because in that video, she had short hair.
I completely forgot that. Okay,
she had,
interesting.
She was wearing some glitter wigs, but then she also had her short hair, same as Rocky IV. But then through the entirety of the movie, she has curly, long, brownish, reddish hair. And if that is a wig, why would you keep your wig on while you're being chased by axe-wielding maniacs on motorcycles?
Yeah, and in fact, it's probably in your interest to lose the wig.
Yeah.
So they're looking for a curly-haired lady, and she could just take it off and throw them off the scent. What are you thinking?
Yeah, we're looking for this girl. It's like, is that her? Nope, that's some 6-foot-tall, butch, blonde-haired girl. That's not her.
Yeah.
Not her.
No, that's another 6'2" lady. This one's definitely different. Yeah. Moving on.
But the car, his car, it was a fantastic looking car. It was a 1950s Ford Mercury. It had the Awesome 50 license plate on it. And Stallone actually owned it. According to Wikipedia, the coupe had a 350 cubic inch Chevrolet engine, outfitted with a blower and added horsepower, a Hurst automatic shifter, and 400 hydro transmission with a shift kit. The car could go from 0 to 60 in 4 seconds and hit a top speed of 140 miles per hour.
Really?
That's according to Wikipedia.
Because that thing looks, it's enormous, yeah. It looks like really lumbering. What I know about cars, you can fit on the back of a postage stamp, but like he flips a button that's just got nitrous oxide written on it, something the car just fucking takes off.
That car and that scene, along with Mad Max Road Warrior, just really gave me like an inspiration as a kid. It's like, I want a car that has a shifter where the little knob, you pull on it and it gives you nitrous. What does it do? I don't know, but it looks cool.
Don't know. It sounds amazing, yeah.
Rob, what'd you think of that car?
Not a big fan of it. I mean, I appreciate it for the time period and whatnot, but I don't know. It just kind of, it goes back to that masculinity thing we were talking about.
Well, I think we've got a good spread here. Myself, living in Colorado, I had a Jeep for a little while. Dan, you're living in New York City. Do you even own a car?
No.
No
I actually haven't. I haven't owned a car in 25 years.
Whoa.
Yeah.
But you can get behind the wheel of a car and drive one.
I have a driver's license. Yeah. But I haven't owned a car in 25 years. I rented a car in a very recent trip back to England to take my wife out outside of London. We drove out into the English countryside. It was lovely. But I don't know how good an idea it is actually for me to drive these days, to be honest with you.
Conversely here, Rob is a huge fan of the more environmentally friendly type automobile. He has a Tesla, and he's looking at another type of electric vehicle. What was it called again?
Rivian R1T, the new electric truck.
Have you heard of those, Dan?
I have not, mate, no.
Yeah, it's interesting looking. I mean, so it's like we kind of hit, the different corners of automobile ownership. I would love to see both of you guys get behind the wheel of the Awesome 50 and take it for a spin and see how it would go.
Well, I can't drive stick, so I wouldn't be able to do that.
Oh, there you go, actually. So I can claim at least some credibility back here, because everybody in England, when you learn to drive, everybody in England learns on a stick. And in fact, actually, most people still drive a manual car in England these days, anyway. So the automatic cars have not made the impact in England that they have over here. So I know how to drive a stick. I just haven't done so, I've maybe done so 5 times in the last quarter century. So I probably shouldn't be. I probably should just be off the road at this point. Hey, listen, I also wanted to point out another thing on Cobra. So the main villain guy, right? The main, again, this is going back to our first 40 on the 80s episode with Commando. Remember how you got me and Mike on the question on who was the radar operator from the Coast Guard? It was Bill Paxton, right?
Yeah.
And and you said he's been in 3 other Schwarzenegger movies.
Okay.
And he was one of the punks in Terminator.
Yep.
The main villain in Cobra is one of those 3 punks as well.
What?
Yeah, he is. He's the guy who nudges Bill Paxton as Schwarzenegger's coming towards them, walking across the thing, and he's got no clothes on. He's the guy that nudges Paxton and goes, "Hey, what's wrong with this picture?" And
Kidding.
and he says, "Wash day tomorrow, nothing clean," right? And then he clicks his fingers in front of his face. That's that guy.
No,
I don't know. I
shit.
don't know what his name is in real life, but that's another connection point with all of these films.
He's been in
Looks
a
like
lot
his
of
name is
films.
Brian Thompson. I mainly remember him since, I was born in the 80s and I was a big Mortal Kombat fan as a kid.
He
The
was in
second
Mortal
Mortal Kombat movie.
I didn't know he was in Mortal Kombat. Oh, the
He
second.
was in Mortal Kombat 2 Annihilation. He played Shao Kahn. Really bad movie. Terrible.
Yeah.
But he played the bad guy there. Who do you think was a better bad guy between, going back to Commando, is he a better bad guy than the Freddie Mercury looking guy from Commando?
Funny that you should bring that up, Dan. Now, do
It's
the line. Do
such
the line.
Which one? Which bit?
Come on, Bennett.
I mean, this. Oh, yeah.
Put away
that's
that
right.
chick gun, Bennett.
I
Let's
don't need
party.
a gun, John. I don't need no gun. Yeah, that's an interesting question because they're sort of. He's more demonic, isn't he? Like, I would argue he's a scarier bad guy than Bennett. The guy that played Bennett kind of made the Freddie Mercury joke himself,
Right.
didn't he? Didn't he
Yeah.
say something like,
He did.
I considered it, I thought of him as like Freddie Mercury on steroids or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, Bennett is obviously a fantastic bad guy.
Yeah.
But different in tone. He's a bit more sort of theatrical, isn't he? I feel like.
He is maybe more technically proficient, but he did have that switch. You remember Arnold was able to push that switch where he became unhinged, which I think the villain in Cobra was largely unhinged throughout. I don't think he really had like an off switch. Of all people, the person who was identified by Bridget Nielsen is the one that decides to dye his hair black very badly and try to sneak into the hospital to kill her. I mean, if their X-Gang was as deep, if their bench was as deep as they made it appear, didn't they have someone else they could have sent in there?
No, that's
The
a good
cop,
point.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the cop
that
was
on the
part of the
force, yeah.
gang. If you look at the little sequence where they're doing their overhand axe curls, there's a guy in there with a suit, maybe a banker, maybe an accountant, I don't know. But they were really trying to paint the picture that, watch out, these guys are everywhere. So probably could have been a nurse that they could have called on instead of sending the head bad guy.
That's true. Yeah. Why would you put your like number one guy in such jeopardy, right? Yeah.
But was he the
That's a good
boss?
point.
Was he the leader of this gang?
Oh, that's an interesting question as well, isn't it? Because there wasn't he was certainly the most prominent, but
Right.
there wasn't necessarily like a mastermind, was there?
Yeah, they
just seemed like
got
a group
together
of, like,
on
true
Thursday
believers,
night.
didn't they?
It's like some people go bowling.
Yeah.
These guys get together to do their
Yeah.
overhead curls. And
It would make more sense if he
down.
wasn't the head of it, because then he'd be like, oh, I need to correct this mistake before, the head honcho figures it out.
does he ever talk? No, he does
yeah,
talk.
sure.
He has a couple of lines towards the end, but
He does.
when he's
Probably just because he can't act.
that's possible. I mean, like when he's sitting there sharpening his knife with such intensity that he's just dripping with sweat. And then, the female member of the X gang come and is like trying to talk him out of it. Let's send someone else. And he just, he doesn't say a word. He just keeps sharpening his
No,
knife.
he doesn't. Yeah.
How could he
Yeah.
ever get any kind of followers? You'd think he would have to have some sort of charisma to draw people, to want to show up and bring a friend night.
Maybe that's even the scariest part about this, right? This is just a group of true believers who are self-organizing, right? There is no way to really stop them. There will always be another person. Like just because you kill this one guy, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've defeated the movement as a whole, right? That's actually kind of
Good
a scarier
point.
prospect. If you guys recall the end sequence, he dies a gruesome death. Right? It is pretty bad, but even by 80s action film standards, he gets put on that hook and then slowly roasted. In that, I guess it's I don't even know what a foundry, I guess, of some kind.
It's got to be some. I think it's like one of those beef preparation type things where they send in the entire carcass and they hook it on the hook.
Right.
Then the flames, I don't think, are supposed to burn off the hair and whatever else is on the exterior.
I mean, we were joking that it just seemed like it was a factory that produces fire.
It was a fire. Sparks everywhere, And,
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Was this an early morning gunfight as well? I mean, did Stallone turn on all the stuff at the foundry?
Yeah, good point.
I don't recall.
Yeah. Or they come in mid-shift and just like,
It was definitely a precursor to Terminator 2.
Well, I mean, there was a factory scene in the first Terminator, though, too. That came before Commando and this movie.
Yeah, that was 84.
Terminator 2, but just going back to the violence really quick. Apparently, the movie that we saw is like the toned down version of it, because apparently when this movie first came out, or before they were going to release it, it was going to be rated X.
Really?
Because of the graphic scenes of violence that were in this movie. So they had to trim it down to get it to rated R.
Would this have been around the same? Well, it's 1986, I suppose, isn't it? Because there's a thing in England of not so much action films, but certainly horror films, and they refer to them as video nasties. That's what they were. A load of films that we now know have become like kind of cult classics. Things like Evil Dead and obviously things, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, those kinds of things, right? A lot of those came out in like the early 80s as well. But having the X rating was basically box office death. It would really, really destroy a film in terms of the money it would make.
Everything I remember as rated X was like in the adult section of the video store. But NC-17 was largely, in my mind, sort of stuck out as like, ooh, those are the really edgy films. So to think that this movie could have been rated X, absolutely, Dan. It would have been death at the box office.
That's wild, isn't it? Yeah. That final sequence, man, I mean, like, plays of Chekhov, right? And Chekhov, the whole thing is, if there's a gun on the mantelpiece in Act 1, it will have been fired by the end of the play, right? It's all foreshadowing. Okay. So when that fight is about to start in the foundry, and that hook goes like sailing by in the background, somebody's ending up on that hook.
Can we talk about the zombie squad really quick? All right, Rob, I don't think you've seen this movie enough times to fully appreciate that part of it, but Dan, I know you have, and you've probably wondered, what is the zombie squad? Are there any guesses, Rob?
Well, maybe this is a sequel to Dawn of the Dead, and they got rid of all the zombies in the first movie, and now they have to take on regular people.
That's the wrong genre.
Yeah. No, but I think, Rob, you're onto something there, because these are all union guys, so they can't be fired. So
But no, as a kid, again, I decided I was going to start chewing on a matchstick. Hearing about the zombie squad and the police, I started wondering, is that something I can apply for someday? That'd be a really cool job to have. What does it take to be accepted into the zombie squad? And apparently, it's an LAPD section, a division, where the officers are tasked with criminals that are considered too violent or unpredictable for regular police. So the zombie squad guys have to take care of them.
Is that real, or is this just for the movie?
No, man, this is pure fantasy. But
sure.
Yeah, I had a moment there where I thought, "Hang on, wait a minute. Is that like, is that like the SAS or the Delta? Like, it sounds made up, but it's not.
It's even more elite than those guys." But no, I had to do a bit of a search online to try to uncover some of the mystery behind the zombie squad. It makes you wonder, are there other guys on the zombie squad? If it's the squad, it's got to be more than one person, one or two people. The guy that Stallone was working with, I don't think he was quite as edgy as Marion Cobretti.
He was a bit more of like the comic relief, wasn't he? Like, he would tee up Stallone to make his wisecracks and all that kind of stuff.
He is the hype man for Marion Cobretti.
That's right. The police captain or whatever rank he is, that he keeps getting in trouble with and that ends up knocking out at the end because he doesn't like Cobra's maverick ways.
Right.
That guy is the main psycho from Dirty Harry.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, he's the guy who takes all the kids on the bus in Dirty Harry. Correct. Yeah.
It's like I was thinking more in terms of, he was in the movie Hellraiser. Rob, ring any bells?
Oh my God, Hell.
Yes. Yeah. He was the guy that basically escaped hell that brought about the Cenobites to bring him back.
I thought he was like the stepfather or something like that. He was kind of a douchebag.
Yeah. He was the stepfather, but he escaped hell. and he was his brother's like twin brother. You know.
I have to interject here, Dan. My brother Rob is kind of an aficionado. I can't even say it. He is a specialist when it comes to horror films. That is like
really?
His bread and butter.
Yeah.
Yes.
As cultural artifacts, you know what I mean?
Well, there's a lot of great material from the 80s. Rob?
Oh, yeah.
What would you say would be some of the highlights of 80s horror?
Well, I mean, you have the franchises at their peak, especially at the early 80s. I mean, most of them started in the 70s, like Texas Chainsaw, Halloween, and I even think Friday the 13th. That Nightmare on Elm Street was one of the first 80s slashers, and it really kind of took it up to a new notch.
Yeah.
But I mean, like Friday the 13th Part 4 is one of my all-time favorites. And
Part 4?
Yeah. The final chapter.
I can't give you any grief because Rocky 4, I would have to say, is largely my favorite. So I get it. But because 40's on the 80s, anything 80s is fair game. So we can definitely
it is.
Pick one of those things out. But back to Cobra and the Zombie Squad. So he's got his
name doesn't make any sense, by the way, you know, because it's Cobretti with an E, and the movie is called Cobra with an A. It's just, you know, they couldn't have just changed the letters slightly for his name.
So there's another sequence that would be an interesting little backstory, like if they were to do a prequel. Who in the police force started calling him Cobra, or did he start calling himself Cobra? Sort of a self-hung title.
So you can't really give yourself a nickname, can you?
Right.
That's you can't like. Everyone's calling me Snake now.
Unless he just had the Cobra symbol on everything. They're like, all right, I guess this guy's name is Cobra.
Yeah.
And we do love the fact that he doesn't believe, I guess some of the women in the 70s didn't believe in bras. Cobra doesn't believe in holsters.
That's true.
So you fire that gun a bunch of times, and best place to holster it is straight down the front of your pants.
And the Cobra symbol is perfectly on there that way, so that way when he has it in his pants, you can see the Cobra symbol. Otherwise, it would be sideways.
So is this toxic masculinity again, Rob? He's got a cobra sneaking out of the top of his pants?
Out of his pants, with his skin-tight pants to try and emphasize, maybe.
Talking about fashion reminded me of it. But the scene towards the beginning, you know, he has the shootout at the supermarket, and then I guess, you know, call it a day, you know, time to go home and relax. He pulls up to his beachfront parking spot, you know, and there's some gangsters hanging out in their car there, so he pushes them out of the way and gets out of the car to confront them, and he kind of palms the guy's face to take the cigarette out of his mouth.
He does.
And then he rips his shirt like right off of his chest.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, the guy's wearing like the guy's wearing like an undershirt, right?
Did you ever notice the microphone that guy's wearing?
Yeah, he's got the white tape on his chest, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's got a tape with the wire hanging down there. I was watching that again with Rob, looking at it with fresh eyes, and I saw that for the very first time 2 weeks ago. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? Either this guy is a confidential informant and he's like maybe he's working with Cobra. You know, this could be like a whole other side story going on that they know each other.
Yeah, I think you're giving this movie too much credit.
Come on, it was based on a novel, so obviously there was a lot of thought put into it. You don't just make movies based off a novel and there's not like a huge backstory, because people are always saying, well, you should read the book. You should read the book. The book always has a detail.
This is pre-digital, so obviously they were filming that day, and they went back to look at the dailies, and they're like, that guy's microphone's still on there. Like, should we tell anybody? Like, no, just print it. Who cares?
Nah, don't worry about it. Yeah.
But I never noticed.
Yeah, Rob, this is literature, so you've got to think of the wider universe.
No, I was just going to bring up, because Johan, obviously you were a cop in the military. Dan, were you as well?
Oh, you don't even know
how you guys met each other? No? Okay.
No.
I just didn't know if this gave you a different perspective from being a cop and then watching this movie about a cop movie.
Well, it might have inspired me to become a cop in a lot of ways. No, but quick little story. Dan and I met through Mike. And we met in person for the first time when Mike was getting married, asked me to be his best man. So I hosted a bachelor party out here for the guys out here in Colorado. At that point, I had already met Adam, but I had never met Dan. So we all met up out here and, you know, had some activities set up for the guys. And one of them happened to be up in Estes Park, which, Rob, you're familiar with. And I had some golfing set up for us. And Dan, by the way, I was impressed with how you were striking the ball. So, you know, hats off to you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, cap, mate. But
thank you, mate. I do appreciate it.
And I think, if memory serves, there was a portion of the course where there were a lot of elk kind of just lingering in one side of the course, the fairway or whatever. There might have been one or two, but I do remember that. And for whatever reason, it somehow came up with action films, and Dan began to quote Bennett from Commando. And maybe it was brought on by me imitating Arnold Schwarzenegger's voice, but once he quoted Bennett, I was like, this dude right here, man. It's like, I'm not letting go on this guy. He's a good one.
We knew we were going to be mates.
So that's how we met. Had a great weekend, and then we met again for the wedding, for Mike's wedding. It was a great time again. Yeah, it's just been too few and too far between with the get-togethers in real life, and I would love to get that changed somewhere here in the future.
Yeah, can I ask Dan a question?
No.
Okay, well, I'm going to. So, I mean, obviously you are British, right? So, how are American action movies viewed in Great Britain? Like, obviously you were aware of them and know them, so they had to have been popular enough for you to have seen them and memorized them. But, like, what were American action movies in the UK like?
The short answer to the question is that they were and remain incredibly popular in terms of things to get excited about. They were something that, I mean, I remember as a young man just being, whenever there was a new action film that came out of the States, was released in England, it was such a big moment. So exciting, right? And there was something about the scale of those films, obviously really big budgets, but they were big stories, and in the lead characters were enormous personalities. They were big and muscular, and they said funny things, and they blew stuff up, right? Like, it was just like, they were just this kind of, they really did embody that kind of 80s aesthetic of everything was bigger was better, and all of that kind of stuff. But there was something about the scale of the films that spoke to the scale of America. Certainly in my mind, where like when you come from somewhere like England, it's a small country, right? You can fit 3 Englands into Texas, to give you a sense of how small England is compared to America. So in my imagination, and in the imagination of like a lot of English people, America just seems like this incredibly vast, unimaginably big place with so much variety and so much diversity in terms of what the place looks like. And there was also something about the boundless optimism and enthusiasm and excitement about life that was you tended to experience in American people. So these films were kind of like this cultural export that spoke to this much bigger idea of what America was. And, obviously I know that we're all laughing about things like Cobra and Commando and all those kinds of things now. But in terms of a media product or, sort of a cultural product, they were, speaking for myself, they were my first great love. And all of my influences growing up were American. Music, film, TV, and I just had this kind of, and I guess maybe even back then when I was very, very young, I think I always knew I was going to live here because of just discovering this incredible country with all of these interesting things and interesting people, and thinking of life in the biggest way possible. When, growing up in England in the 80s, it was a very, it's kind of a fairly depressed country with that kind of image of that grey image of like Thatcher's Britain. Like that's what I grew up in, and it felt small, it felt enclosed, and it felt kind of claustrophobic. And then we had our English speaking brothers and sisters in America, so we were kind of connected by a language. But then there was this like whole other version of life that was embodied by America, of just this like boundless kind of optimism and excitement, and the possibilities that life can offer you. It just seems so vast in America. That's a long way of saying I love them, and I mean, and they continue to be to prove popular today with all of the other the franchises that have come along since then, like Fast and the Furious and Mission Impossible, and I mean, just pick any of those big action series that are still going today. They're massively popular.
Dan, that was beautiful. That was an amazing answer. Rob, you satisfied with that?
No, it was interesting just because I was thinking about. I don't know if you would consider James Bond to be one of the original action heroes, but it may have started in England if you think about it that way, but,
Yeah, I'd be curious. I have to go back and watch a documentary about James Bond to see how much Hollywood was a factor in that versus, English studios.
But, I mean, you guys still consider him to be yours, right? I would imagine, Dan?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, when you think about any action hero, I mean, where I sort of draw the distinction... Well, actually, what am I trying to say here? Because, the Bond stories tended to be very international, right? He'd be going to Monaco, and obviously Live and Let Die. They were down in New Orleans, and
Yeah.
they were definitely international stories.
But
there
they
was
weren't
something
tackling
different.
international issues. I think it was more or less a jet-setter playboy going someplace to bang a different type of girl.
And to that point though, right? Though the original stories, the character in the books wasn't like that.
Okay.
He was much more in the way that Daniel Craig. Daniel Craig happens to be my favorite Bond.
Mine as well.
The Bond character in the books was much more like the rendering of Bond that Craig has done in his films,
Right.
versus the super slick spy who is never wrong about anything, and even when things go wrong, you get the sense it's because Bond wants them to go that way, so he can, because he's got this longer view, everything works out according to how Bond planned it. That sort of super slick sort of spy guy was not how the books were originally written. He made mistakes. He fell in love.
Yeah.
He was not that guy that Roger Moore and Lazenby and those guys.
Lazenby.
Yeah,
I hate that dude.
rendered him.
Lazenby
But
is
yeah,
the
mate,
best. He was the best Bond.
What are you talking about? You're being sarcastic right now, right? The movie that he was in, though, I will give you credit for that. It was probably the most heartfelt of the Bonds, because he actually gets married and then his wife dies, and it kind of ends on a bit of a dour note.
There's arguments over whether that's officially a Bond film, though, right? Isn't it? That's always the thing that everybody always brings up with On Her Majesty's Secret Service, because it wasn't produced by Eon, I think.
Right. It was
so there's some distinction as to whether.
I think that one's an official one, but there was a Sean Connery one when Roger Moore was playing one that he reprised the role, and I think that one is like an
It was a different studio. It was Never Say Never Again.
That's true. Yeah, Never Say Never Again. Yeah,
and he wears a hairpiece throughout, which...
of course.
Yeah.
Why are we talking about Bond? Well, I guess it's
that's a good question. Good question.
The one-man army of Stallone and Cobra, I guess, Bond fits that as well. So I can see the relationship.
Yeah, he does. That's true.
Rob, I appreciate you at such short notice being able to join us. Thank you, Rob, for joining us to make it more of a trio.
No problem. It was a blast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is great.
But there is a lot of material that comes from the 80s, no matter how ridiculous, that can get some great conversation started, because you always start to connect the dots. And
that's true.
Rob, you were born in the 80s, the late end of it.
Yep.
Being as it was the latter half or even the latter quarter of the 80s, you don't remember the 80s.
Nope.
But it was a magical time for Daniel P. Sampson and myself. They were formative years, to be sure, and many of the action films that I saw, I actually emulated once I was in the military. To wrap it up, put your guys' improvisation hats on. You ready?
Uh-huh.
All right, we are new members of the Axe Gang, and we just showed up at the locker room here. Oh, shit, guys, this is our first night. How did you guys hear about this? I saw this really intense dude at Starbucks. I saw he had his tattoos, and I asked about it.
Yep.
And they're like, yeah, come on out here, and this is my first meeting. What brought you guys out?
I mean, I think the very obvious answer, because they're trying to overthrow the government and do a new world order kind of deal. I mean, I heard about it on Facebook.
You guys limbered up. You think you're going to have any problems doing these? I don't even know. How many repetitions are we supposed to do? It seems like there's no end to it. They kind of just keep clanging it.
Guys, I thought they supplied the axes. I didn't know I had to bring my own.
No. It's totally a personal preference, because there's wooden handles, there's synthetic handles. It makes a difference. Okay, and there's even
maybe I can get one axe. I certainly haven't got two.
Well, quick question for you: did you bring your spiked knuckle knife? Because it's not just an axe gang; it's a spiked knuckle knife gang too.
That's a good point. All right, you know what, guys? I'm just going to go home. I'll come back next week.
Bring your machine guns as well, because we're also a machine gun and a motorcycle gang.
Yeah, very loose with the term axe.
Yeah, it's like, have you seen the brochure? These guys, there's so many rooms for advancement and opportunities to sort of spread out. So I'm really impressed with this organization. Look forward to the first company pickup.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to join Fight Club.
Thank you, gentlemen, for making yourselves available, and had a great time. So thank you so much.
All right, guys. This is great.